People aren't always getting type 1 circuits even when they think they are. We like to say at APX, one of our mantras is latency is the killer of applications. When you have to run it over 2 networks instead of 1, you're adding latency, you're adding packet loss. We only quote and sell type 1s. If we can't get a type 1, we'll no bid it. They had what was supposed to be a primary and a backup. When they had an outage, both circuits went out. There is a bit of a veil, a bit of a shroud behind it. It's kind of crazy how much expertise and just dogged nature it takes to deal with these companies sometimes.
From a network and voice services integrator and provider, you touch lots of different industries. We talked about a few different ones, traditional segments that people would think about, healthcare, financial services, retail. And I'm actually excited to talk about this one because this is a little different. And I'm gonna lead it up to that. I'm not gonna say anything more, and I'm gonna let you intro and provide a little background, so I don't steal your thunder here at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of my favorite customers to talk about because, like you said, it's a little off the beaten path in terms of what you'd think of for the traditional verticals that we all like to talk about. But this one is a prison voice and data services provider across the United States. This company has close to 600 locations now. So it's a pretty big customer of ours. And this one is one that came to us through an advisor years ago. They brought it to us, and we sort of slowly started earning their trust. They had some circuits with direct agreements with carriers. They had some with other aggregators. But what they were really having trouble with is you could probably guess, and maybe you've noticed this before, but prisons tend to be in the middle of nowhere. You're always driving down a country road and you're like, oh, that's where the prison is, the federal prison is, or whatever. So a lot of these were just really hard to get service to. And part of the reason we started getting a few of these wins here and there, sort of inching in the door, was we were going to the trouble of getting agreements with these very small rural fiber carriers out in the desert in Nevada or wherever it is that it may be. So that was kind of what started the whole thing, and the dominoes started sort of tumbling after that, because after we did a good job with those, they're like, all right, well, why don't you take a crack at some of the more mainstream, carriers and Lex that we're all a little more familiar with. And then fast forward, I think the first one was about 8 years ago. We're now working with close to half of those sites, and we're winning more and more as they come. The other ones are just still on contract or whatever it is may be, but it's pretty great. Now they call us, they tell us where the new one's going to be, and we send them the contract, and we're getting that turned around and usually starting off the project management within a week of when they send us the quote. So it's really awesome customer story, but what's even more interesting about it is what happens when things don't go well. So a lot of people don't realize this, because a lot of our images of prisons and jails are kind of the stuff we see from movies from 30, 40 years ago, right? But modern prisons really, and prisoners pretty much run off of iPad type technology, right? Prisoners have tablets, and they use that for all of their communications, for their entertainment, education. All of that comes through basically an iPad for a prisoner. And that's also where a lot of their, if you're good behavior, rewards, all that sort of system comes from this technology. So one of the things the customer told us was like, no, you got to understand, when our circuits go down, riots can happen. because
Oh, jeez.
because they need an outlet, just like any person would, and all of a sudden you're cut off from people, but then all of a sudden you have no entertainment or technology or communication. Things can go south fast. So that it's just kind of fun, because you don't think we love to say in telecom, like, oh, it's telecom, we're not saving lives or whatever. And may not be saving lives here, but we may be stopping riots, which is pretty fun. That's what reliable tech.
I mean, that probably is saving lives,
Yeah,
though, right?
probably. I just don't want to say.
I mean, I don't know what the rate on riot to like physical injury
Yeah,
is, but it feels like I mean, again, going back to like the movie connotation, right? Not to like I mean, yeah, there's probably a direct correlation
yeah.
between physical bodily injury,
I'm sure
right?
there is, and so that's kind of a cool thing that most people wouldn't think of. It's not a traditional business you think of, but that's a large fiber customer that needs reliability. They need uptime. And so when we can go and give them type 1 circuits, that's what's, earned us the business over the years.
Oliver, what is an aggregator?
An aggregator, uh, probably the easiest way to describe it would be like a wholesaler, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as an aggregator, we have contracts with around 200 carriers across the U.S. and Canada. And what we are seeking to do is essentially buy those circuits from the carriers of the world, the AT&Ts, Frontiers, Spectrums, all of these, and the smaller ones. We got Paul Bunyan Cable out in Minnesota. Love to give them a shout out. But we our job is to buy those wholesale, right, in bulk. We get a discount, and then we try to really our goal is to deliver a better customer service experience to whoever's buying the circuit. So especially in case, and now single circuits, of course, we can do it. Where we really tend to shine is when we've got a customer with multiple locations, much like this prison services customer where they've got 500 plus locations across the U.S. We like to be able to give it all to them on one bill. We like to be able to, if they want, we can flat rate the pricing. So it really makes it easier on their accounting team to see if there's any irregularities when it's the exact same price for all 500 locations. And then just generally have a better experience for the customer. If instead of 500 bills, you have one, instead of having, in their case, 30 plus carriers to call or more, instead of having to deal with that, they have one number to call for support. A single project manager who handles all, the entire project and sites. That's generally going to be a much better experience for the customer.
I feel like there's two main pathways for a company into working with an aggregator. And you mentioned both of them, right? The first one is density and complexity of carrier relationships. If you're a single site customer and you have redundant circuits, you have 2, 3 carriers you're interacting with. If you're a single region customer, company, and you only exist inside of one footprint of one phone company and one cable company, maybe even though you have multiple circuits, you have 2 relationships you're carrying on a major, on a big basis. But when companies cross into this line where you start talking about dozens of locations, hundreds of locations, right now you get into this first issue you brought up, which is just the complexity of relationships. And I've been doing this for so long, I forget, like just actually figuring out who's the cable company
Yeah.
for this address that I've never actually been to personally. Like, I don't know who the cable. So just actually even, Paul Bunyan, in Minnesota, right? Like if you're, in Miami, Florida, you have no idea who that is, right? Or how to find them. So, I find, so it's like, that seems like the first major pathway. Second major pathway, you talk about billing and financial complexity, right? Again, and sometimes this falls on the IT team or the telecom team,
Right.
or they have to manage the invoices and deal with these things. But inevitably, it ends up as a finance load.
Yes.
Where I've talked with enough finance teams where they're almost actually, a lot of times they're willing to spend more money to reduce workload on their finance team just because, if you're getting 500 invoices that you have to correlate, evaluate, do we even have this location still? Are we paying for something that we've stopped using?
Right.
And there's a disconnection there. How much and then I think when you started talking about this in the case of these prison locations, of rural locations and places where if you just called up the phone company, called up the cable company and said, I have this location that I need service at, I think people don't realize this until they do it the first time. if it's not passing other doors, the financial reality of that company then going out and lighting that location for you, you might, if you're talking to the wrong person, they're just going to say no, thank you,
Right.
right? Like we're not even going to give you a price, right? So, how specifically for the prisons, I want to keep it
Yeah.
there. How much of this was we've got a sprawling network that we need to manage differently? How much of it was we just need help getting service in the first place because we just don't know how to talk? I mean, what pushed them over the edge to say, like, we want to do something different here?
Yeah, I really think it was more of the latter. I mean, I think, at least initially, that our foot in the door, and our advisor's foot in the door with this was the hard to reach locations. It was the tough, and just like you described, they think, okay, oh well, it's in Nevada, so I'll call Cox and Lumen, for example. But if they can't do
Mm-hmm.
it, who can? And that's when it starts getting tricky. You start working with providers who maybe have like 10 people in one office, and they can be harder to get a hold of, to coordinate projects with, to get realistic timelines with. As with this prison services company, as you can imagine, he's got his own contracts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
once he gets them to sign on the dotted line to provide the prison, right, to provide his services, to give the prisoners voice data, calling services, whatever it may be, educational services. They usually is then on a pretty tight timeline to get service into the building to start delivering. So the longer those get delayed and missed, that's revenue he's not making. He can get penalized for not meeting his end of the deal. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the foot in the door. It was, can you get these hard to reach places that other people can't? After that, I think what took us from just the fringe locations to all of them, the ones that are even more mainstream, was the consolidation, the ease, as you said, on the finance team, the ease on the IT team. Because one thing that we've run into a lot that is really interesting is that people aren't always getting type 1 circuits even when they think they are. That's a big, big problem.
Tell me more, Oliver.
Yeah. So, it's not always, it's typically not advertised. If in that former example, if you go to Nevada and Lumen says, sure, yeah, we can quote you here, and you get the quote, and sure, maybe it's a little high, right? And for the average telecom or wholesale person, you might not think twice. Okay, well, instead of 1,000 for a gig, it's 1,600. It's 1,600 because they're buying it from this rural carrier, and then you're getting a Type 2 connection. And this is it's bad for anyone, but we like to say at APX, one of our mantras is latency is the killer of applications. And people in tech know this, right? So when you have a Type 2 circuit, you're getting more latency. It's just a fact of life that fiber optic it may travel at the speed of light, but when you have to run it over two networks instead of one, you're adding latency, you're adding packet loss. And when your whole business, especially like that of a prison service, internet and phone service provider, when it completely relies on those applications running well and not having a lot of latency, it's very
Mm-hmm.
important to get a Type 1 circuit. Uh,
I want to dig into this
yeah,
more. Let's talk about type 1 versus type 2 and aggregation specifically, because from a network design standpoint, first off, for clarity, you're the star. Type 1 versus type 2 differences. What are you actually buying?
sure. So the way I like to explain it just on the most basic level that even a salesperson such as myself can understand is Type 1 just means that the ISP and the last mile are the same provider.
Mm-hmm.
So
The physical connection that goes into the location is owned by the ISP.
exactly. When
Okay.
you have a Type 2 connection, for example, it means the last mile and the ISP are different. So when we say last mile, we mean quite literally, it may not be a mile, but the last bit of fiber that is running from the business to what the network is a different company than the one that is
Mm-hmm.
selling you the internet service. So all that means is that a Type 2 really has to run over two networks, and type 3, 3, and so on. And then type 1 just means everything's 1, right? It's the same last mile and the same ISP. So aPXnet, it's kind of one of our sort of founding tenets, I guess. About 15 years ago, we kind of made a decision we're not going to deal with type 2s. Not that the demand wasn't there. People, still like to have everything in one carrier or whatever. There's reasons people use them, but we just found it wasn't worth the hassle. It wasn't worth the trouble tickets we were getting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one of our standouts, is that we only quote and sell type 1s. If we can't get a type 1, we'll no bid it. So that's type 1 in a nutshell, and why we're such big proponents of it. And if it's going to be like this prison services company across all these different states, our goal is to get a type 1 for every single site and keep the latency low, keep the riots from happening, and keep everyone happy.
There's so many different business models in telecom, right? So you have a last mile provider. We talk about type 1 circuits. Typically, a last mile provider is going to be one of three types of entities. It's going to be a phone company. It's going to be a cable company. It could be, thanks to deregulation, it could be a competitive local exchange carrier. It could be a CLEC that's actually pulling infrastructure around and putting stuff on poles or putting stuff in the ground. Yep. Or it could be the power company, right? And then in the type 2 world, not to say that like type 2 by default is bad.
Right.
There's a lot of network services providers, resellers, aggregators, however they want to classify themselves, that exist by popping a market and then buying circuits from last mile providers. And they get technical, they have an N and I, and then they're buying uni or tail circuits into locations. And the customer's perceiving the network build as being that provider's IP, right? Because they don't see the underlying transport. From a customer standpoint and from a determination, because if APX is going out to market and buying a type 1, you're buying internet access at a wholesale basis, right? You're going to AT&T, Verizon, Lumen, you're going to Cox, Comcast, Charter, et cetera. The customer then sees IP addresses from AT&T. They see a network path from Comcast. They see that network,
right? Because
that's the network that they're using. This turns into a conversation a lot of times of like, well, back to the beginning part of it. I already have a AT&T sales rep calling me. Why shouldn't I just do business with AT&T? It's AT&T's network. Like, how does this not add cost, complexity, and time delay to them to go through an APX to then, end up purchasing an AT&T service or a Comcast service or a Cox service?
That's a very fair question. I mean, I think, and now, first I'll just say, of all the people that buy circuits and resell them, aggregators, other, sort of aggregator-esque companies, they don't all do it the same way. Some of our competitors, and for their own reasons, and sometimes very good reasons, they do run it over their own network after so they'll take that AT&T and then they run it back over their network, and then for maybe they have some managed services, some different things they're doing with the circuit, right? Mm-hmm. As far as if you're just a customer, and you're sitting back and thinking, well, yeah, I'm talking to the AT&T rep. It's really more of a customer service model that we're trying to improve upon. If I can't do better than AT&T's toll-free number, if your circuit goes down and APX can't do better than that, we should probably all just go jump off a bridge. And that's not to speak ill of what is one of the greatest and largest networks in terms of their actual infrastructure. But I think most people can relate that if you've got the service at home, at your business, we've all had the situation where it is really hard to get an outage fixed. It is really hard to get a real person on the phone that actually cares and wants to get it up and running. So we try, we're generally told that we're pretty competitive price-wise in terms of us versus getting a direct. Now, it depends on the carrier, right? Just like how, for example, a TSD has to go out and negotiate with all 400 of their suppliers and what their rates and everything are going to be. An aggregator has to do the same thing. We work hard to build the relationship and the volume over the years with, for example, AT&T, so that we get the maximum wholesale discount rates we can, and so we can provide the most, the most cost effective or cost efficient quote to our customers. So really, it's a combination of providing, layering on better service, better project management, knowing that from an agent or a consultant's perspective, knowing that you'll actually get paid on time and that our commissions are accurate and that we're very much channel focused. But for the customer, it's really just who am I calling? Who am I picking up the phone? Who's actually got, looking out for me? You know, uh, who's got proactive monitoring built in so that if something goes out in the middle of the night, they're already on it, working on getting it fixed. Those are the sort of things that we're trying to do to make sure it's such an infinitely better experience for the end user customer that is, even if we're in the ballpark in terms of price, it's going to end up being less cost for them, just like we were talking about. If it's $20 cheaper a month, but it goes down once a month, or you're constantly having billing issues, or it's creating a strain on your IT and your staff, it's not really $20 a month less. It's it's a different way of looking at cost savings, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's primarily why we can stay in business and why we continue to grow is we just give a better experience and allow them to run their business.
If you're not in the business of telecom is usually it's not something the average company is thinking about,
Right.
right? It becomes like a cost line item. Now in case of this a prison service provider, right? They're in the business of telecom, right? You've got a team that has come up delivering
Yeah.
telecom, managing telecom circuits. Like this is a savvy telecom customer. Um, there's major price point differences between dedicated services and broadband based services. But I mean, again, if you're delivering internet to a multi-thousand user installation, you're not buying broadband cable modem circuits to deliver these things. So in terms of like scale, immediately I go, okay, 500 locations, $1,000 a location on average. This is a $500,000 a month, $6 million a year telecom budget. I know that number, spitball, it's probably higher. Some sites are going to be lower. Then you have redundant circuits. I
Right.
mean, so if from like a range, I immediately go, this is somewhere between like $5 and $10 million a year of a telecom, right? And um, I have no knowledge of what it really is, obviously, but I mean, just like
Yeah.
my the way the brain works. Uh, I go immediately if this is your core expense of the business, you become very sophisticated at delivering and understanding the service. So it tells me that like besides your comment earlier about like have you ever interacted with the phone company for service and support, like people if you've ever interacted with a phone company for technical service or billing support, you never want to interact with a phone
Right.
company again for tech. I mean, we do all day long and I don't want to deal with it,
Right.
right? um, but the point is like this is a very savvy customer. This isn't like your like average mid-market enterprise. It's got a dozen locations. This is a very savvy telecom buyer. How is it that they weren't able to get the phone company to deliver service to a rural location and you were like what's the disconnect there? And this is a big point for a lot of people, right? Like how come you were able to do it and they couldn't?
Yeah. I think part of it, I wish I could tell you we had some secret magic that enables us to do that, but I think it's mainly due to specialization. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think most aggregators, they're very much and this companies, right? The whole point is to, it's part of why it's sort of in the word aggregator, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
aggregating a bunch of different kinds of services together. And APX is a little unique in that we really just want to do one thing exceptionally well, and that's dedicated type 1 fiber internet. I think that's why we're winning with customers like this, where they already have all their own applications very specialized for this environment, right? They have their own voice applications and services and software that they're running through this fiber pipe. But even though, like you said, they are sophisticated, all we do all day at aPXnet is dig and find fiber providers, build relationships with them, and project manage them. And I think it's just that specialization. It's as simple as if you do something a lot and work hard at it, you'll get good at it, and that's what we've done. It's getting to be we're trying to be the go-to person for fiber internet for that reason. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, these savvy companies know and are it goes to show it's tough even for them, right? Just like you
Mm-hmm.
said. I mean, it's never easy. So it's not that it's effortless over here. Of course, a lot of these are very tough, and we're fighting with them. A tricky thing about the um, prison service company is, as you can imagine, the access is very tricky too. Can you imagine? Well, it's
You know, you know where I immediately go to with that one. Oh my goodness, that's such a good point. Um, I won't call them out by name. I'll just say it's a phone company. We have one phone company that we work with all the time for access circuits or internet circuits, right? There's three major phone companies in the United States.
yeah,
Like, just pick your poison. And I literally, as part of our installation sheet, we literally tell the customer a tech will show up randomly to install the service without notice. Like, you're not going to know when they're coming. They're just going to show up. The truck's just going to be there and be like, "Hey, we're here to install our circuit." I wish there's nothing I can do about it,
right,
right?
right,
Like, it's just going to happen. And for the most for the most part, we our process, we make sure we try to front end this as much as possible. Do we have cell phone numbers? Do we know who local
right.
contacts are? Do we have building property management in place? Do you have a security console number? Because when you get that phone call, you want to be like, okay, somebody will be there really soon to let you in to go do this work, because otherwise you get rolled, and you lose days. But like the visual of like a dude in a hard hat showing up at a prison at the prison gate and being like, "I'm here to install your fiber," and then being like, "You're not on the list."
This is our daily
Oh,
reality.
oh,
We
it's
do
so
this
funny.
all the time. I mean, being one of,
Oh,
a very large customer of ours, I love like, when I'm sending like, we have like a pending installs meeting, we're talking about all the different ones and it's like, yeah, tech showed up but said he couldn't get, things like that. That is part of our challenge too. And that's part of why this customer likes us is because we have learned to anticipate that. So yeah, otherwise
it
things can go haywire very quickly.
in all fairness, again, to the tech showing up, most of them are contracted third parties. They don't even work for the carrier,
Yeah.
right? They just get an address. They don't know what the address is. There's some dude in a truck. It's like, oh, go to this street now, and they're just looking at their like dispatch software on their tablet, right? And they like roll up to a prison.
Yeah.
You're sorry, you're not getting in.
Yeah, so
Oh,
that's a big part of it. And that's that, having I think even though of course reschedules happen, mistakes happen, like you said, a lot of them are contracted out. That's just the reality of the industry. At least the fact that we can somewhat anticipate that it's another thing. It's like if we're going to go to another carrier, they got to learn all this over again.
I have a client, and I mean, you wouldn't realize this, but like federal installations sublease space out to like like commercial businesses, and I have a client, and they're an architecture and engineering firm, and they lease like part of a floor from the Federal Reserve. If you want to get into the building, you need to have a background check done for you by the Federal Reserve before you can go and like be there. And you're like, oh, and you need to bring tools in. By the way, you're going into the Federal Reserve. What's the first thing you have to do? You have to walk through a metal detector
Oh,
with your tools. You want to do wiring work. What do you need for wiring work? You need knives. What can you not bring into the building?
oh
Knives.
my gosh.
Like, how do you cut cable, right? And it's such like a like, until you've been through that, it's like such a it's a funny disconnect that you don't really like. Oh yeah, like,
I didn't bring my airplane safe tools with me today.
yeah, exactly, right? Like, and it opens up all sorts of weird problems where it's like, if you're doing low voltage work, um, and you have a subcontractor that had a DUI or some other charge, and then all of a sudden, like, I mean, again, we've seen all sorts of weird stuff come out of this. It's stuff that you don't think about very often at all.
Yeah.
Um, the I mean, wow, yeah. I'm at the prison. I can't install your circuit.
I'm telling you, man, this is a daily thing. But yeah, and they'll, getting them to reschedule effectively, especially when they're out in the middle of nowhere. Our PMs stay busy and they're very good. Thank God.
It's in this case, you said that the foot in the door and the initial problem was like, we have locations that we just cannot convince anybody to service,
Right.
right? So you end up getting a phone call that says, okay, we have a location we can service, and can you do it? And obviously the answer was yes. And you got it installed, and they said, okay, great. Here's another impossible location that we can't service. And you're like, okay, we figured this one out too. And then there's probably like a third and a fourth. And then you get into a conversation of, hey, we've got, 600 locations. What does that like takeover then look like of saying we've got like the hard locations with you, and this process was great. There's going to be like some like, hopefully, I would imagine for you, some tip over that says like, let's, how do you win the rest of the business? And so what does that takeover look like with existing relationships, existing circuits that are billing? Do these stay alone? Do they come over? Things that are currently running, usually like there's like a do no harm, do not touch them, leave them
Right.
alone, don't change what's working, kind of mentality.
No, I think I that's true, and there is a yes as a less sophisticated if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality
Mm-hmm.
to overcome sometimes. I think what it was is that tipping point, like you said, of okay, we've you build the relationship with the client to the point where like okay, we've done these nigh on impossible ones for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not all we do. That's that may be a specialty of ours, not something we can do, but we can also do the more the easier ones just as well, right? And I think just the nature of relationships is that once you if you help somebody out, they want to help you out back, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's very it's very much relationship driven with our company and with this client in particular. um, I think also one of the things that they started to realize, even as you said, even though they're pretty sophisticated, there were instances of them getting type 2s when they thought they were getting type 1s.
Yep.
And so then,
If I had $1 for every time.
right. And then the trust starts to erode between them and the other carriers and their other vendors they were using. And then as long as we can maintain that and they know that those are our table stakes, that it will always be type 1, then it kind of just evolves that way. If we can do that and
It's
we can get it implemented and installed quickly, and the services stay up, and it doesn't make him break his contracts, and he doesn't have to pay back, you know, pay back for outages, that that wins us more business over time.
there's I want to talk about this type 2 issue for a
Yeah.
second. A couple things that I rant about a lot. One of them is this like marketing term garbage phraseology that happens. And I'll pick on Verizon for a second. Verizon has a product, Fios. And Fios just means internet. And the problem, I mean, and like the Verizon definition, Fios just means internet. It could be DSL, copper based. It could be, fiber broadband. Like there's a big variety in that product. And this, you talk about like the type 2, like you're getting type 2 and you don't realize it. And the problem here becomes like I come to a carrier and ask for pricing, and they come back and they tell us it's your example, it's 1,600 instead of 1,000. Like, okay, whatever, it's a rural location, maybe there's additional build costs that went into this one, the financial model, and then they order it from somebody else and you don't know, right? Like that's for most. Even what's wild, even doing this professionally, if you're asking even the right question to the wrong person, you don't get that information back. You don't find out until you're so deep into provisioning or after post installation that this actually happened. And there's a couple issues that come out with this one. The first one being, did you intend to order that circuit type 2, or did you understand that you were layering on another relationship that causes a support issue down the
Yeah.
road or billing issue down the road? But what I see more that's really the problem with this is I already have a circuit from that other provider and I was looking for redundancy. I talked to you because I wanted redundant infrastructure, and you promised me redundant infrastructure, and then you delivered me redundant infrastructure over the same physical infrastructure as my existing circuit. Now I have no redundancy.
It
And you go back to the carrier and like, hey, I can't use this. And they're like, sorry, you signed a contract. It's installed. Deal with it, you know?
yeah, it is a major problem, and it's something even working at the TSD level that I didn't realize exactly how much it was happening. Um, we have one client, a different client, but same vein, large multi-location client across many states. And what tipped them off, their IT person was savvy enough. Were working with a different aggregator, and they had what was supposed to be a primary and a backup circuit that were diverse entry
Mm-hmm.
everything, like in the different ends of the building. That's what they were sold on. But then when they had an outage, both circuits went out. And it's like the IT guy could do basic math and was like, something's not adding up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, another interesting phenomenon I've seen is that sometimes resellers will buy redundant circuits from other resellers. So it would be as if, you know, if I said, okay, well, we've got our primary here from DIA from Comcast, and then our backup is from X aggregator, like a
Mm-hmm.
different aggregator. And then you got to that they don't have their own network, so it's probably just
Mm-hmm.
another Comcast circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is a bit of a veil, right? A bit of a shroud behind it that um, if you're not, if you don't ask the right questions, and you're right, and to your point, the right person who's
Mm-hmm.
got the knowledge and the honesty to give you the right
Well,
answer.
and really the issue is if you're I don't want to put this in like a demeaning standpoint. If you're an average company or customer, it's not about being an average company or customer because you just don't have access. You could be a very large
Right.
company. You could be and you're interacting with a team, and the team you need to interact with, you don't have direct access to because they don't give direct access to customers for this team. And the way the circuit gets provisioned, it's like, oh, we have to deliver a circuit to this address. What's the cheapest and fastest way to deliver the circuit to this address? Oh, this other provider is already there. Let's just use them and deliver a circuit to this address. And then you're like, whoa, wait a minute, like that wasn't what we wanted. Uh, we talked about riots for a little bit, but you mentioned something else that was interesting to me, which was contractual obligations
Yes.
and the SLA. Right now, in this case, you're in this like cascading problem, right? Where it's prison service provider, prison, which really means state, contract with the state to deliver service with contractual obligations and requirements, right? Uptime, availability, speed, installation timeline, whatever, usually a mix of those things, right? Like, and then that comes down to your customer, this prison service provider. So now they have to meet these obligations with their
Yep.
customer. That gets passed to you, which then in turn gets passed to the carrier for installations, right? There's like four layers in that onion. Um, the knowing how infrastructure providers actually deliver service from like quoting to actual installation, there's like another four layers that people don't even think about that like is going on in this. That's a really big
It
stack
is.
to
It
manage.
is. And you bring up a good point. I mean, one thing that I haven't yet mentioned that is important about this specific customer, and you know, the way you just described that, it immediately lends itself to, okay, well, how are you helping reduce that issue instead of just adding to it with another layer,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what follows, right? So one thing, like, and even though we are DIA specialists, that is, I mean, that's probably about 85% of what we sell here at aPXnet. We do have a pretty advanced circuit monitoring solution that this prison service customer, uses heavily, which is a proactive solution. Um, we have a couple different flavors, like a proactive and a reactive, but in this case, they use the proactive. And um, what that means is that if the circuit goes down for whatever reason, our knock 24/7, 365 US based knock gets notified, and we go after it to get it back up as quickly as we can. Um, Another kind of interesting thing, and one thing that's, you were asking earlier, how do you tip the scales, right? What's helping win more sites over? This our monitoring platform also allows us to monitor other carrier circuits. So we have, let's say we started with, 20, and we've got all our APX circuits that they can view in their portal, nice ducks in a row. Then they can see the other 580 with other various carriers if they're willing to pay, a small per circuit fee. And that's what they did. So they're able to see which circuits are the most reliable, which ones are staying up, which ones are going down, and then what the response and times are like, and what the effectiveness of getting them back up is like. So if you can, if sure we are an extra layer in a sense, but if you can contribute to fixing the problem instead of just being another roadblock, then you can be an asset, and that's what we're trying to do for them.
There's one infrastructure provider, we'll keep them nameless, near and dear to my heart, and they actually do proactive monitoring on their circuits. Now, it's impossible to get the contacts changed once they go live with this provider. So whoever's on the order is a technical contact. That person's always going to be the technical notification if the circuit goes down. You can't get it changed. It's amazing. But in their case, if a circuit goes offline, you get an email notification. Hey, your circuit's down. Power, basically confirm you have power. Which is a really common issue. When you're talking about
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of locations, right? Millions of locations. But what's amazing about this process for me is their support system will not let you open a ticket until 4 hours have elapsed of an outage.
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can get an alert from them. You can validate it that it's offline and it's not power related, but you can't actually open a ticket to start processing a repair until after 4 hours. And again, if you're, an average customer, I don't care how big you are. If you're a customer of this organization, which probably half the country is, right? Until you've had an outage that you try to get fixed, it's like, great, your SLA says it has a 4-hour mean time to respond, not repair, for a fiber-based circuit. But if you can't even open a ticket until 4 hours after the outage, even if you get alerted to it 1 a.m. in the morning, you got to wait 4 hours, and then you've got 4 hours, and then you've got whatever your repair time on it. You're sitting on, a day outage that shouldn't have been. Like, that's frustrating the first time you experience it.
Yeah. It's like it's probably just something that'll be easily resolved, and we're going to make you wait 4 hours to make sure it's not that before we take any action. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I mean, I as you can imagine with our NOC, a lot of the carriers out there have maybe not that exact policy, but ones where you might be able to open a ticket, but you can't escalate it until X amount of time has elapsed and so on. The good thing is the ticket on our end, at least, is open, and we are pursuing it, right? So we've got someone bulldogging it as soon as the ticket's opened. Not we don't have a multi-hour policy waiting before we try and take action. Really, but it is what you described is definitely pretty common with carriers who aren't really willing to lift a finger until a certain amount of time has elapsed, or escalate it to an emergency level beyond, like, they'll have all these different levels of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 tickets and so on. And I bless our engineers for being able to navigate all that.
You talked a little bit about like customer profile for aPXnet earlier, which is, what is, obviously in this case, like 500 plus locations, great. But like on average, like where do you tip over, and where does a company tip over that it makes sense to start working with a company like yours?
Interestingly, we're 100% channel, so we only get the opportunities that our advisors bring us, right? And as you could probably imagine, most of them are one sites. That is if you took the average, it would be a little more than that. The average number of arms that people have is less than 2, right? But overall, we're mostly getting single sites. And, I think part of the reason for our success and having, a growing reputation is that we do try to take care of those one site customers really well. As I said, it totally depends on the carrier who we have the best relationship with, who, if we can get really aggressive with the wholesale rates, it depends. Um,
Hmm.
but really, the tip over is more, instead of the number of sites, it's more of the number of carriers, in my opinion.
Okay.
That, once we start stretching into three plus carriers for one customer, even if it's just three sites, you often get these when you have like, I mean, we've had things like, maybe it's doctor's office, or, um, I'm just trying to think of the different law offices, for example. They maybe they're smaller, and they're still DIA customers that need reliable internet. But once you start getting into that three plus carrier kind of environment, where they it starts to become a strain to keep from the accounting and IT perspective, that's where we can probably provide the most value. Um,
Hmm.
for that single site customer, we're still able to give a lot better service and project management generally, than the average carrier. But they'll get the most out of us. It'll be the most mutualistic if they have multiple carriers, I would say.
I come back to, you know, my simple view of this is if you've never done circuit provisioning or support with a phone company, you don't really understand why you never want to do circuit provisioning and support with the phone company.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and one of the things that I hate the most that I see a lot is this like promised timeline. And inevitably, what happens, and what I see with our clients is, the IT department is usually the last to know of something happening. Oh, we've signed a lease for an office space and we're moving into it in 30 days. By the way, we need internet and we need to have everything provisioned in the next 30
Yeah.
days. And so I try to help we try to help our clients get ahead of this, right? Bring us in, get involved with site selection, right?
Yeah.
Find out what buildings, make sure the office manager, the powers that be know that you're there to be a resource of like which buildings to evaluate, and then at least we can provide a data point before you sign a lease.
Yeah.
Easy installation, really hard installation, cheap internet, really expensive internet. Okay, do you really like that building that's going to be really hard to install
Mhm.
and really expensive? Okay, fine. Just give yourself 6 months, But at least there's like a dialogue that can occur. But the thing I hate so much to see all the time is like you get these, how long is it going to take to install this circuit? I mean, I could tell you on average, this company that you're going to use over the last however many circuits that were provisioned with them that we saw personally, this is the rolling average in your market. But until you sign the order and somebody goes out, like you have no idea.
Right. It's an unknown. What lovely pole permits await you, and other such things. So you
I
make a
I
great
had
point. Go ahead.
I had one, and it was an agriculture company. They when I say agriculture, they were agriculture supply company, and they so if you needed fertilizer, like
Right.
like because you were a farmer, like you needed like tons of fertilizer, like this is who you purchased it from. And they had one location they were trying to get fiber to, and they didn't find out until the installation was running that because the telephone pole was alongside of trees, they needed the arborist from the city to be present when the fiber was being pulled, and there were two arborists in the city that could do this. One was on leave, so there was only one available. That one was scheduled for 9 months.
That is one I have not heard before. The
It
required city arborist.
it stands out,
Right.
right? Because then what do you say? Like, how long is it going to take? And I try to tell people this a lot, which is like, if anybody's promising you a timeline for installation, like I can promise that we will get this as quickly as possible.
Right.
But unless you're ordering service from a provider that has capacity in the building that you're actually in at that moment, that all they have to do is plug a cable in and run it. But now even that's getting complicated with riser management company. Actually, good segue. Riser management companies, like if you're installing service into a building, it's not just about getting service to that location. It's also getting service to where the customer is inside of that location.
Yes.
Multi-tenant buildings means, usually basement impo
Hmm.
and then a suite up on top of the floor. Some carriers will do low voltage extensions, will actually extend the DMARC. Some carriers won't extend the DMARC
Yeah.
now. Some buildings have riser management companies that want to talk to the carrier and figure out how much they can charge the carrier and what the carrier will pay them to run the cable. Some buildings don't have riser management companies. How do you navigate this for your customer?
That's that is, the pretty much a huge focus of our project management team, and they're very good at it. I mean, one of the cool things about our process that makes my life a lot easier is once we sell a deal at APX, as soon as the customer signs the dotted line, our project managers, we give them a 24 hour SLA. So we say, okay, you got 24 hours to reach out to the customer to start the process, but it usually happens within 1 to 2 hours. So that is something we've commonly heard complaints about. It's like, yeah, I didn't get a PM assigned until 2 weeks after I signed.
Usually.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well, I mean, this is part of the process people don't understand.
yes,
Average duration. Let's talk about it specifics. Average duration is 7 to 10 days for order acceptance. You sign the order, you give it to the carrier, right?
yeah,
It's 7 to 10 days before they go through credit check, order acceptance, order booking, right, and goes into the system for PM assignment.
yeah.
And it could be another week after that before the PM actually gets assigned and hits their SLA trigger to reach out to you. So you've got 2 weeks in time that just is just like a black hole before the project even starts.
Yes. So that part of why we're able to it's the small parts that make up the whole, right? In the sense that if we can get a jump on that, we've got a much better shot at navigating this ecosystem you're talking about and getting in the order in it on time. So our PMs, they get assigned. They usually first thing they do is they call the customer and basically for info gathering, right? They're like, all right, this is what I know. Help us, get the rest of the information we need. And that's where a lot of questions like those get asked. Like, hey, do you know, what's, we're usually going to have our salespeople are pretty savvy. They're going to get a lot of this info up front, but asking things like, okay, yeah, is an extension going to be required? We know, luckily from working with all these carriers, we generally know, unless it's a brand new carrier that, we haven't gotten all our due diligence completely flushed out with after many orders, we're usually going to know, okay, this one will extend and this one won't, or this one will in certain situations, right? So it really boils down to project management expertise and a buffer zone. Being quick enough about getting started that it gives you that extra couple week buffer to where you can navigate who the riser management company is and or how you're going to get it up there. And in some cases, telling the customer, hey, look, you're going to have to hire someone to come and do this extension, and then we'll help you navigate that too. Well, if it's someone that we've partnered with or someone, so there's a lot of that. It's never cookie cutter. It's for each individual project. You've got the PMs have to dig in and figure out how to get it done. So it's just, again, a lot of expertise, a lot of practice, because that's what the PMs do all day, is trying to get, various fiber projects installed.
Yeah. Because just DMARC extensions become very complicated for people. And again, if you're dealing with remote locations, like let's just talk. Let's talk about the easiest one, right? Like you're just across the country. You're based in LA and you've got an install in New York going on. That now you need to get you don't know who the people on the ground are.
Right.
It's a new project, right? So how selection of DMARC extension becomes a problem for an IT team that they have to resolve. That a lot of times who do you call? In Minnesota for a DMARC extension if you've never dealt with it before. At what point is that being communicated to the customer? Like, is that part of the circuit selection? Like, are you telling people like, hey, there's these 4 tier 1 provider, we can get circuits from these 4 3 people, and what level of granularity are you getting into with that at that point? Like, this one's going to extend, this one's not going to extend, this one we like, but they won't extend, but we already have a company that'll do the extension for
Right.
you, which is going to cost us much money.
This is happening very much up front. This starts with our sales team or with our channel management team. When they're savvy enough and do this enough to know, I mean, they want things to install and bill and commission just as quickly as anyone, right? So they're smart enough to go like, I know this because I've you know, shadowed a lot of my channel managers. I've, helped fill in for them, learn kind of what they do. And if all else is equal, right? Let's say you're talking about a customer in New York City, right, in a 50th floor of a building. One of the first things they're going to be thinking about is, okay, what a, getting service to the building is fine and dandy. What about to the 50th floor? And
Mm-hmm.
luckily, with the wholesale relationships we've developed, they anticipate that too. The carriers do. So if we're working with, I'll just use an example. Someone we might work with a lot in New York, like Crown Castle, for example. Our wholesale manager there that we work with to get quotes. This is someone who can absolutely anticipate that. Yeah, this is what's going to need to be done, and they'll specify this includes, to the 50th floor, which will or will not require instruction. That's included in the price, and so on and so forth. And this is the timeline that we estimate that that'll take. So we're starting right out the gate. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
project managers that hash out the details.
Now, for a prison, you've got a whole level. I mean, you've got the MPO, designated telco, location, right? That stuff is coming into the
Mm-hmm.
prison, and then you've probably got preferred providers that actually are authorized to do work inside of the prison, right? Because you can't just like show up and be in a common, like a hallway with like a ladder and a hard hat,
Right.
right? Like a little bit of coordination has to go into that. How much are you taking on? How much does APX take on for that? How much? I mean, where do these lines kind of like? I'm just curious where they start and stop for you with your customer. Like, are you guys just getting into the building for them? Are you helping them extend farther into the building at this point? Is that they're taking it on? Is that there's a third party that then you're coordinating with the customer and this third party to do this stuff?
I will say, because I'm not usually involved in the installation part of those. I'm not the most well versed on that. What I do know is that this company, because that's their specialty. Usually we're getting it made, to the MPO, and then they're taking it from there. The company
Right.
that's actually providing the services, because they have a closer relationship with the state, right? With the state prisons, with they have their own contractors and people that they bring in to actually run it to where it needs to go. So that we're usually, our challenge is just figuring out who will even get it out there in the first place. It's usually, once we can get it there, it's usually the customer themselves that is like, all right, we can take it and run with it from here.
Well, I mean, so what is the measurement of success and failure for a project with a prison, right? Like, is it, I mean, we talk about installation, like, can they even get it installed?
Right.
Installation timelines, of uptime availability, like, when you're going back and you're sitting in a review meeting with your customer and you're going through and you're talking about, 10 sites, 50 sites, 100 sites, whatever the list is, and you're kind of working down the list of like, there's install, and then there's like post install, like ongoing, what is that's being tracked that is like makes or breaks the relationship, or makes and breaks their relationship and their contracts with these states?
It, depending on if you're talking about the kind of the process or the result that occurs from it. At the most simple level, with all the different carriers they've worked with, our measure of success is that they continue to bring us new circuits, and new requests every
Mm-hmm.
week, right? It kind of, and that speaks for itself, right? But for them, what we're told time and time again is that you're able to get to the hard places. Your circuits stay up because they understand, of course, the type 1, that
Mm-hmm.
they're reliable. They're DIA, so it's about as reliable as you can get in terms of internet delivery. And
Mm-hmm.
barring, a some sort of physical occurrence, like we love to use the backhoe because it actually happens. Um,
All the time still,
yes,
which is amazing.
I don't know where all these backhoes come from, but that those are kind of our simple measurements. It's like that's what they tell us we're doing right, and it shows itself through their continuing business and winning circuits from other vendors. but it's just getting a tough one and keeping it up and running because it's type 1. And when it does go down, does it happen often? No. But when it does, having that proactive monitoring to make sure that someone on our engineering team in the US is on it and showing updates regularly, at least they have some peace of mind knowing that someone's working on it. It's not just sitting out in the ether. Those are, I mean, it's not complicated, but if you can do all those things, that will win you the business.
The internet is the fourth utility. Network is the fourth, is the fourth utility, right? Electricity, gas, power, water, right? Electricity, water, gas, internet for companies, right? So that's why I say it's the fourth utility. It's, but for a lot of, I think for most, it's like, it should just work. I don't want to think about it. What's the fastest I can get for the cheapest thing possible, right? It's not really necessarily like, the evaluation is very different. It's like, oh, okay, these guys are cheaper. Let's just go with them usually.
Yes.
Right. What's something that you wish more companies understood about internet and circuit delivery that would, effectively, it would make their lives better in the process of, of that?
Yeah, I would say, it goes back to a little bit of what we talked about before, but one is just know what you're getting. It unfortunately is not always the most transparent thing. Just as you described with how what you call it, like the marketing garbage that you get from a lot of the phone companies, and that you don't always know what does FiOS mean? It can mean a lot of things. That's a great point, Knowing what you're actually getting, knowing where it's coming from, and what the nature of the delivery is. Is it something that's going to be affected by weather? Is it wireless and requires a fixed wireless and requires a clear line of sight? Is it, copper in the ground that gets affected by rain and bad weather? Just knowing,
all real examples.
Yeah, knowing what you're actually getting and where it's coming from. That's kind of the base level. Like if more customers understood that, I think it would prevent some of the pitfalls they run into. We have a lot of customers who maybe they have many locations, but they operate independently, and it's the branch manager who is in charge of sourcing the internet, not like a centralized IT team. We have won those types of customers over when they've realized that this, cheapest internet I could get that was going to keep my budget low has actually caused major issues, because when the internet goes down, we've had to send everyone home for the day. And what's that worth? Was that worth, the $200 a month instead of maybe $300 a month? Like, knowing that just because, something is less expensive on a monthly basis does not mean it's going to result in less expense is important for customers to know about their internet services.
Such another good example. Don't delegate or abdicate responsibility for critical utility services to somebody that has no background or experience running them, right? Because the branch examples, it's unfortunate. It happens all the time. These are all real world. The whole like rain fade for fixed RF is a thing. Like, does your provider? Look, I love fixed RF. Like it's one of my favorite things ever. If you're using somebody to do an installation that doesn't know how to do a rain fade calculation based on the geography of where you're installing the circuit, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Like it's a water intrusion into copper never happened all the time. Like, the amount of circuits I've seen going back, 30 years of T1s, or, a box on the side of the street had like was hit by a car and was never replaced, and now had like a rain could penetrate, and then every time it rains, it was like I can remember this. With a very large company, they just knew every time it rained they were going to lose service to a building. Like, it was just a thing. Oh, it's raining, that building's going down. Like,
I'm just imagining some guy who's like, "Oh, my knee's hurting. Time to go home. It means the rain's coming. The internet's going down." Yeah,
it's basically what it was. and the crazy part about it was they knew exactly where it was that was causing a problem, but they couldn't get the phone company to fix it.
Yeah.
They're just, and again, direct customer of the phone company, had no, like, large and sizable, but just didn't have access to the right people to get anything changed.
Right. And
And
if you don't know, and you're calling into the main support number, it can be it's difficult. And
yeah,
and that's not to that's the thing about the industry. This is not the point, is not to say, oh, the customer doesn't know what they're doing, or it's just that it's kind of crazy how much expertise and just dogged nature it takes to deal with these companies sometimes. And that's when it's nice to have someone that has been through many rounds with them in the ring. Not to present it as combative, because it's usually not, but when
yeah,
there is a problem, they know, all right, this is what we have to do to solve it.
no, Oliver, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, excellent chatting.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Good to be here.